Greetings. Well, welcome and thank you all. It's a thrill to be with the four of you. In some ways, this is the main attraction. The leadership panel that we have each year at the Alliance Conference is a star attraction. People are very excited to hear from people who have been at the State Department for a long time, and of course the new leadership at the State Department. It's a thrill for us to be able to welcome all of you, the four of you, today to bring you together, and thank you for being here. So I'm going to introduce our four panelists and talk just a little bit about their bios, just their highlights, but they're all very impressive people, and you can see their full bios on our website and also in the printed program next week. And then once I introduce them, we're going to go right into questions. So we received a bunch of questions from our members in advance of this session. Those questions we shared with you all in advance, and we look forward to a really interesting dialogue. For those of you who might have caught a little bit of what of the previous conversation, people were chomping at the bit, so they were already anticipating some of the questions we were going to ask you all and wanted me to answer them for you, but I wisely deferred on a number of them. So let's start with Nini Farino. Nini is the acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy and the Director of Alumni Affairs at ECA. Prior to this, she was the Director for Press and Public Diplomacy for the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs. She joined the State Department as a Foreign Service Officer in 2000 and has served overseas in Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Ho Chi Minh City. Thank you, Nini, for all the work that you've done over the many years at the State Department, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. Nicole Elkin is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Private Sector Exchange, newly arrived back at the State Department. She was there previously as the Chief of Staff to the Assistant Secretary and was the Director of the Office of Public-Private Partnerships. Nicole was also Chief Operating Officer of Human Rights First, a Senior Advisor for Results for America, a Vice President at Merrill Lynch, and served in various roles at the White House, among other jobs that Nicole has had over the years. Nicole, congratulations to you on your new post, and thank you so much for joining us. Chris Miner is the Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Professional and Cultural Exchanges. She's held program and management positions within ECA since 1993. Chris, you're the veteran of the group. We all owe you a debt of gratitude among the five of us, but also our community owes you a debt of gratitude for your service to the exchange community and also through the exchange community to the United States. So thank you so much. Her other positions have included Chief of the Eurasia Division, where she oversaw the administration of grants in the newly independent states, Central and Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and Deputy Director of the Office of Citizen Exchanges. So welcome, Chris. Nice to see you again. Ethan Rosenzweig is the, I hope I got that right, Ethan. I was working on it. I knew I was going to mess it up. Is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Academic Programs. He joins ECA from Atlanta, where he worked at Emory University's School of Law as Associate Dean. He's a graduate of Emory Law School, and he clerked for the Honorable G. Ernest Tidwell, and then practiced law in Charleston, South Carolina. So, Ethan, congratulations to you, and welcome to our community and to the State Department. And thank you for being here. So, Nini, we're going to start with questions for you, and then I think, as I mentioned to all of you, we're going to have some thematic questions. We'll jump around a little bit so we involve each of you in the different questions that we are hoping to pose to you. But Nini, I want to start with questions around the travel ban. It's being lifted, visa processing, some of the big questions that people have been asking us today and in the past. The pandemic has been difficult for all of us, and probably fun to exchange sponsors in particular has been hit really hard. All of us are welcoming the travel bans being lifted. Can you tell us how the vaccination mandate is going to be implemented? What are you hearing, and what are you anticipating?
Before I answer that question, I wanted to thank the invitation to come join Alliance. Alliance is a very close partner for us, and we really rely on you and your members to also give us input on what we're doing and what your members are interested in. So when I saw when I heard the prior questions for the prior session, I'm like, they're going to ask about this. So yes, we are looking forward to the lifting of the travel ban. And I would like to start off by saying that most of the criteria for what types of vaccinations will be allowed, what types of exceptions will be made, are largely decided by the CDC. The State Department is is closely following this with the interagency, and we have a team who is working internally and externally to better understand what the rules are. So the gist of this is, starting November 8th, all foreign nationals traveling to the United States will be required to be fully vaccinated and to provide proof of vaccination before boarding any flight. There is a lot of different details based on, what country you're from, etc. But that is going to be a requirement. The CDC has determined that for the purposes of entry into the United States, accepted immunization includes WHO approved, FDA approved, and I think the WHO site has a list of the approved vaccinations. That information is updated day to day. So if you want more current details about that, check the CDC and the WHO site. There will be exceptions to the requirements. Some of them that we've heard of include children under 18 or certain travelers who are on non-tourist visas, including, what interests all of us, the J and F visa. So at this point, there's a lot of moving pieces, and as soon as we get more clarification, we are actually, as we speak, meeting with different parts of the State Department, to find out about what, how is that exceptions going to be made? What does that look like in real life? Does the traveler who is let's say an F1 visa applicant, do they have to appear at the visa window with certain types of documents? How is the transmittal going to look like between the consular section and CDC? That's all being determined at this point, and we're happy to share whatever we discover. Probably next week, things are going to be a little more clear. So sorry about sort of like that's clear as mud kind of information sharing, but it's a new thing for us. It's really a lot of moving pieces involving so many different people. So that's what we have for today. Back to you.
We're just days away from the changeover, and I would imagine that you all are preaching patience, right? It would be great if on Monday
we feel exactly. We know where you're coming from, so we feel the same types of anxiousness and expectation.
So one of the things you might have heard, if you heard some of the questions in the last session, and we heard this a lot, right? So everybody, as you know, the Alliance urged exceptions for people coming from countries where vaccination's a problem. That 10% cutoff makes us a little concerned, because our concern, to be specific, is that between let's say 11% countries with an 11% rate and 20-30% vaccination rates, which are still pretty low, that the number of participants who might be eligible for those to come to the United States from those countries will be few and far between because vaccinations are still quite low. So part of what we hope you all will be thinking about is how is the implementation, how is that being rolled out? What's the impact on those countries? Maybe being able to identify them. We know that the 10% and under countries are identified. I think there may be 50 of them. But part of what we wonder is over time whether there's an ability by CDC or state, probably CDC, to understand what the other countries are and what that range is, and the participation from those countries. So hopefully you all will be thinking about that. For the people who are allowed to come to the United States who are not vaccinated, what are the State Department's thoughts about the mandate to become vaccinated once they're here, and will there be any assistance provided for those travelers?
At this point, first of all the questions you raised about the 50 countries, how does that impact the others? That's all being discussed. We share the same, questions about those challenges, and so it is being taken up by the interagency. So rest assured, we're advocating, for our travelers, particularly the ones that affect us most closely in ECA and Alliance. So thank you for raising those. We have similar concerns. And as far as the travelers that do get exceptions and are required to self-quarantine and get their immunizations, we're also discussing what that might look like. I do know that many of our universities and partners who are eagerly awaiting our travelers have already mentioned that they have arranged, for the students, for instance, or academics and other travelers to be, vaccinated, when they get to the United States. So that's under discussion. Again, it's a enormous task trying to figure out what works best for, the United States, and also to facilitate travel. That's what the State Department is about. So thank you for that question, and we'll let everybody know what the detailed plans are in terms of that when we've come to a position.
Okay. Let's switch to visa processing. So lots of concerns. So people happy about the travel bans being lifted. I checked in with a number of our members and heard almost universally from them, this is great, but let's see if people can actually get the visas, right? Yeah. So visa processing has been a huge challenge. In your mind, what do you think, what are the conditions that will be necessary in embassies abroad for visa processing to become normalized? And when do you think that might happen so that there's more timely processing of these visa applications?
Yeah, I think that question is I do not have a sort of like a special eye into the future, but the pandemic definitely has put us in a very unique and sort of like a once in a lifetime historical situation. Everything we're facing is a first time. So, but we do take these concerns seriously. ECA works very closely with our colleagues in the Consular Bureau to discuss consular capacity, etc. So we are in constant contact with them. As far as an estimate of when we will, be able to see normal, I really can't say. Every country has their own unique situation. I mean, I think all of us in this room understand that. So as situations improve in each country, then doors open, normal capacity can resume, but, that does not account for the backlog. I think this is not unique to the State Department or consular operations. This is unique to the private sector and all the other, organizations that are trying to catch up. So we are very interested in resuming consular capacity. Of course, here I am speaking on behalf of my consular colleagues, of course, but everything, there is nothing that's not being considered, including borrowing consular officers from different posts, figuring out if there's a regional solution here, if there's a better sort of COVID situation in one particular country, could we not, send travelers there? But even the traveling portion is also a challenge, because it may be okay in that country, but then maybe the sending country may not be in a position. So, and then you have also specific rules and regulations in terms of airlines, and airlines are also not flying as often. So I'm just raising these types of examples to illustrate how complicated it is, but we are looking at everything we can to resume normal operations.
One of the things we talked about earlier this year in our communication with the State Department and also with people on Capitol Hill was the need for information, for transparency at the embassy level. And I know that I think there was a directive sent out from state to embassies basically saying, hey, tell people what's going on. One of the questions we get a lot from our members is, why? Why is there a backlog in this particular country at this particular embassy? And of course, we don't know the answer, but the embassies know the answer. And so just to encourage you all as you're thinking about that transparency and the way in which you're sharing information now, right? The fact that you're thinking about how do you borrow, how do you shift, how do you take on or take different steps to facilitate visas. That's helpful to know. I think it's also helpful for people on the ground and sponsors to know what's happening within a particular embassy. One of the things that's been really, and so I want to encourage you all as you're thinking about that, one of the things that's been really helpful to the Alliance is to have people at ECA that we can turn to when there are country-specific or embassy-specific challenges. And a question that we get a lot, and this came up when we were soliciting questions for this panel, is has there been some thought to, at Council Affairs, potentially with the encouragement of ECA, to have people there at a senior level appointed to interact with this community of exchange sponsors when there are challenges on the ground? Is that something that has come up? Have you all given that some thoughts?
So that is a really good question and a really good concept. And I wanted to mention that, the suite of offices that the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy manages is one of the newest in ECA. And the reason it was created, and, Nicole was part of the sort of creation of, it took different iterations, but the whole point of having, these different offices, including the policy office, was to coordinate these types of challenges, not only with external partners, but also internally. So while we don't have a specific position that only, manages our relationship with our partners, but the role that, my position plays is to ensure that we are addressing challenges and concerns of our partners externally and bringing it to the proper sort of internal interlocutors. So we are doing that, and we actually have specific individuals who only handle consular issues. But it's a great.
So we should continue engaging with you all on that. So I'm happy to keep doing that, and you all have been very responsive. So I appreciate that. And you referred to Nicole, so this is a good transition to our next segment, which is rebuilding questions. How do we sort of think about the rebuilding process? Nicole, the ECA has shown flexibility over the last. Now almost a year and a half, going on 2 years, around how it views its guidelines, and even last year with respect to some of its regulations. Are there things that you all are starting to think about that you can do to help the sponsors who run these programs rebuild next year?
Hi, Lear. Good to see you. I wanted to first just thank you for having me. Look forward to seeing you next week in Washington. Wanted to let your membership know I don't think I was in my office, quite literally in my office, more than 24 hours before I had an email from Lear reaching out, wanting to meet me a couple of months ago. And so he is representing you well, knocking on the door, meeting everyone that is here. Thank you for that question. First off, I'd like to point out that is our priority in private sector exchanges, helping you rebuild your program. You rebuilding your program is us rebuilding our programs. We look forward to working with you hand in hand. During the pandemic, we offered a series of special extensions to give exchange visitors additional time to complete the exchange programs and make travel arrangements. We worked with our colleagues across the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs to facilitate virtual programming, and with Consular Affairs to allow for visa interview waivers and academic programs. And within private sector exchanges, we've enhanced our monitoring mechanisms with virtual surveys. So far, we've conducted 8 separate surveys within the au pair, intern and trainee, secondary school student, summer work travel, and teacher categories, and we're thrilled with the response rates to these surveys. We continue to engage also with Consular Affairs to obtain access to visa services, as you were talking about with Nini, as circumstances allow. For instance, we collaborated with Consular Affairs to send out a broadcast message identifying the visa processing capacity of posts in the Southern Hemisphere to handle the growing number of summer work travel applicants who wish to participate this winter. And we've also added a new scholarship opportunity, the Leadership Development Program, for existing Bridge USA participants to apply for an add-on enrichment program here in DC before returning to their home countries. This opportunity, we think, will strengthen the department's ties to the exchange visitors and develop a strong group of program alumni who would serve as lifelong citizen ambassadors for the United States, but also good advertisers of your programs. And lastly, we also we look forward to introducing the Ambassadors Fund for Summer Work Travel, a scholarship program designed to expand and refocus the summer work travel program toward underserved communities in Europe. So these are some ways we're trying to enhance the programs. We look forward to working with you as we're able to build the numbers back, as the Consular Affairs and can take more visas. But we really want to partner with you on all these initiatives.
Terrific. Thank you. And to stay with you, Nicole, given the combination of a need to rebuild and also low unemployment rates here in the United States, you all on a regular basis, I would imagine, get requests for visa allotment extensions, expansions across programs within sponsors. Can you tell us how you're processing those requests for basically growth in the programs with respect to the programs themselves and also with respect to individual sponsors?
So, I appreciate that question, because we can talk about wanting to build back, but how are we going to do it? And I do want to emphasize our complete support of you building back your programs. There's no change, though, in the process for the program sponsors seeking increased allotments. Despite the pandemic, private sector exchange continued to accept program expansion requests in all categories, except, of course, the 2 programs that are subject to moratorium caps, the au pair program and summer work travel. And as with past protocol, we review expansion requests on a case-by-case basis, based on new initiatives, the diversity of sending countries, diversity within host placements, and the program's ability to meet foreign policy objectives. We completely understand the importance of these programs to your organizations and, importantly, to local economies and to small businesses nationwide. And frankly, not to be too corny, but we will build Bridge USA back better.
Okay. Chris, speaking of building back programs on the federally funded side, you all are starting to do that as well, right? And some programs have already started to ramp up, Fulbright, Flex, and Yes, while other programs, we're told, like professional fellows, may not be up and running again. Can you share with us the internal process at ECA that you all are going through when you're considering which of the federally funded programs to start and what the timeline is for those programs? I think you're on mute.
I'll never learn. So sorry about that. But that's a great question, Hilaire, from you and your organizations. ECA has put together an internal working group that's composed of representatives from each of our program offices to talk about all of the issues that we need to consider as we restart programs. And that working group includes also input from other colleagues in the department and evaluates the many factors that you all know as well as we do when deciding if we can conduct a program in person or not. And those considerations are public diplomacy and, as we've just discussed, consular capacity, the operating conditions of host institutions in the U.S. and overseas, CDC guidance, COVID-19 restrictions here in the U.S. and elsewhere, the availability of healthcare resources for our participants, and then the nature of the exchange program itself. So we have a lot of people looking at this and talking about it in all levels of the Bureau and in every neighborhood. And I would say that because our ECA programs vary greatly in terms of length, from academic year programs to our shorter term IVLPs and youth leadership exchanges and others, we've chosen to consider these restarts on a case-by-case basis. And that's what we do, working with our program officers and offices to provide us information on that.
Anything you could tell us about the program restarts in the near future? Anything that you feel is close to being restarted again?
Well, I can say that I can only speak for my neighborhood, and that is that we are seeing, which is professional and cultural exchanges, so IB and citizen exchanges. I'm seeing more and more memos come up for telling me about programs they want to restart. So I'm seeing an uptick in those, and I'm hoping that as conditions improve here in the U.S., especially in our cities across the U.S., that we'll be able to really start those up more in the new year.
Okay. Ethan, a similar question for you. Are there ways that the implementing partner community can work with you and your team on jumpstarting some of the academic programs?
Well, firstly, Larry, nice to meet you, and to everyone. It's great to see everybody. I mean, we all share these values of promoting exchange, promoting our American values of democracy and inclusion. And I'm just laughing because you may hear an echo. I mean, when we say we want to promote those values of assembly and speech, so the weekly Thursday protesters are outside our building as we speak. So if you hear that echo, they've brought their giant trucks and boom boxes today. So thanks for being patient with us as well. You know, when it comes to, jumpstarting our programs and things that we may see, the Fulbright program and many of our ECA long-term programs, our Humphrey program, have started offering in-person programming again. I was just in Colombia, and we have a Fulbright in-person programming there, and we're expand, and the excitement of that is palpable. So we're anticipating more changes in the coming months. And there'll be a surge of support for that when it happens. And we're going to continue to meet with our implementing partners, such as people here and elsewhere, so we can review the best practices for virtual, hybrid, and the resumption of very safe in-person programming with feasible.
Thank you, Ethan. And to stay with you, as we think about lessons learned from the pandemic, how are you all thinking about changes with respect to your programs? Things you want to do differently based on lessons that you've learned?
Well, I appreciate that. There's first, and we're all so excited about this. So, and I'm sorry if my excitement, I want to talk about so many of the things here that we all share. I think that what this pandemic has taught us all is how we leverage our knowledge to work for solutions and be entrepreneur, and how we can benefit each other. We know exchanges are going to be fundamental to all of our processes. People are hungry for them. I wish you could see the meetings we're having, the applications for our programs for people to resume those in-person experiences. But it's also not a demand from the young people here and abroad. Our partner governments are very eager for these exchanges as well. In fact, I think that their hunger's increased. So there's an urgency to this, as well as there is to the urgency for us to address these challenges. And I think that reinforces our responsibility of how do we do this safely? How do we ensure also, most importantly, that as we're rebuilding, that we're ensuring that no one's left behind, that our commitment to access, to equity and inclusion is just as fundamental as it was before the pandemic. And we're going to need everyone's creativity and flexibility. I think that's the key. How do we be flexible? How do we leverage the hybrid lessons that we've learned as we're moving forward? And, we all talk about this unprecedented times. This isn't ending. We know we're going to be adapting for a long time. And I just appreciate everyone's ingenuity and honestly, your dialogue as well. And I have to tell people as a new appointee, I only hope that you get to work with all the people on this panel as I have for the last few months, because it really gives me hope of where we're going. You can feel the excitement here at the State Department. We are beginning to learn about what a hybrid workforce looks like as well. And I just know what the best days are ahead. So thanks again.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And speaking of hybrid, Chris, so a lot of us have learned the value of virtual exchange as a component of international exchange programs. Do you expect that hybrid or hybrid virtual, I should say, or hybrid programming will be a featured request in ECA solicitations in the future?
Thanks, Hilaire. I love this question because I've really learned a lot myself as we've done virtual and hybrid programming. First of all, let me just say that ECA is so lucky to have great partnerships with our grantee organizations, which we've built over many years and we continue to build upon. And we've seen those grantee organizations to show great creativity, flexibility, as Ethan just said, adaptability, and I would say even the word we used so much at the beginning, pivotability from the start of the pandemic. And that's shown us what we can really do with this new virtual programming. So thanks to everyone who's been doing so much to support all our programs for more than 18 months, I think, at this point. So the experience we've learned from virtual programming is invaluable to us as we begin to increase our in-person programs. And it's through our grantee virtual programming that we've been able to expand the reach of our programs. That's something important that we've learned. For example, our on-demand webinars for English teachers reached over 1 million people worldwide, and that's twice the audience that we had with similar webinars in 2019. And I've seen our cultural and sports programs able to expand their reach through online performances and interviews with American athletes on topics like mental health that have been so important at this time. VLP2 has expanded its outreach, been able to include people who might not otherwise have been able to travel due to personal or professional time constraints. So we've learned a lot, and we know still that there's no substitute for the in-person programming, we do see the future of including virtual or hybrid programming models that will include in-person and virtual elements within the same program. And I think those will be an integral part of our work in the future. We're already doing some hybrid programs, and we see that they offer an opportunity for us to build a community of participants before the participants get to the U.S. and they're able to introduce themselves and dig into the topic that they'll address when they get here to the States. We've done virtual workshops, artistic collaborations, webinars, and still more digital events. And we'll continue to do them while still allowing ECA and our embassies to eventually incorporate in-person activities when it's safe to do so. So yes, I think you will see in some of our programs these aspects of virtual or hybrid programmings. Thank you.
That's great. That's great to hear. And, we had similar experiences. I remember before the pandemic, it was very difficult to get people to do something like this, right?
Right.
People would join without their cameras on, and then not too many of them. But the online portion of our conference has enabled us to invite international partners for the first time to interact with the Alliance and to hear you all at this today during this session, during this conversation. So that's terrific to hear that those hybrid programming will continue to be part of what you all solicit for and will expect. And Ethan, when it comes to academic programs, should we expect something similar?
So I think what you will see, Larry, is that we've been able to reach, and just like you talked about, a much broader audience, and by embracing the hybrid, really the virtual environment, and how can we do that, continue to do that in the hybrid world. I think comes to equity and inclusion, for people who may not be able to reach our programs in person, and specifically I'm thinking right now of some of our English language programs across the world, we're able to reach a much broader group of people. Nothing's ever going to replace that in-person connection. I mean, that's what diplomacy is about, is those relationships. We can grow those connections in other ways. I think you'll see us start exploring those opportunities and asking for our partners' input and advice as we move forward.
Sounds great. Continuing with this idea of advancing our priorities, both what we've learned and what we've seen even before the pandemic. Nicole, I want to come back to you. The high school program is such a critical program to all of us, right? We talk here at the Alliance and within the community about a pipeline, right? So many people that I meet as adults who are involved in international exchange, when I ask them how they got started, they talk about their high school program. Mm-hmm. And I have a niece right now who's a senior in high school who's in Spain studying, and my mother-in-law was in high school and she did a program in Spain, and my wife was in high school and did a program in Mexico. And as a result of and when she was in high school, as a result of these experiences, you know, our family, and I've seen this with others, are heavily invested in international exchange, much more globally minded. But the high school program, like other programs, especially on the privately funded side, have taken a hit. And as you can imagine, and as I think, as you know, schools across the United States, for a range of reasons, may not be ready to bring students back. And of course, there was a challenge even before the pandemic with some schools deciding not to invite international students to participate. We have had a question from our members, fairly regular one, about the possibility of a promotional campaign from the State Department directed at American schools, basically talking about the value of bridge USA programs and specifically the secondary school program. Is that something that you all have talked about, and are you open to considering that type of engagement and promotional campaign?
I love this question because I love this program. My husband also studied junior year, actually abroad in Israel. And we had his entire Israeli family at our wedding. So I completely appreciate the ties that you make. 3 generations of it, actually. I really appreciate the ties you make in those high school years and how it really feeds what you choose to do with your life. To start, I'll say safely reopening the nation's K through 12 schools in the U.S., as you know, has been an ongoing challenge at the local level. So as you can imagine, as we work with our colleagues here in the State Department and in other agencies and can't control their actions, I certainly cannot speak for local school districts and local schools. I would encourage you to reach out to the schools you've worked with in the past, remind them of your programs and what I'm sure is great benefit of having the exchange students in their student bodies were to them pre-COVID, and remind them in ways you want to work with them. I'll also note on a more administrative level, I've updated the advisory letters on the J1 Visa website for secondary school students and host schools, and encourage you to use these letters as promotional materials, and I'll be updating the letters for the other programs shortly. I would really like to engage, once you're done with your conference, in a conversation as to what kind of a promotional or marketing plan we could do. I personally, just in the last few months, we haven't talked about it specifically. I think we do need to wait till all the schools are up and running and there's more confidence in the system of, especially through this winter season, that we won't be back in virtual school or anything horrible like that. I have middle-aged school kids and I'm very happy that they're back in the classroom. But I think long-term it is something we should talk about. I couldn't agree more that the secondary school students who come to the United States for these kinds of programs will also be our au pairs, our summer work travel kids, our IVL peers, all Fulbrighters eventually. They can just go all the way through the line of the programs that we offer. And I would love to have a dialogue about that in the future.
Terrific. Thank you, Nicole. We look forward to that conversation. Ethan, the administration has so many priorities right now, right, when it comes to world affairs. So, on the one hand, you've got climate change. You also have, combating disinformation, supporting democracies, diversity, equity, inclusion is big. The next panel discussion actually today is on DEI. Have you all thought about how you might want to advance some of those priorities through exchange programs? And if so, what might that look like?
Thank you. We've seen this during the pandemic. Our network of ECA alumni are supporting one another in the most relevant laboratories, government agencies, NGOs on COVID-19 mitigation, treatment, and vaccines. We have alumni right now who are at the United Nations Climate Change Conference. They're advancing our shared interest in the climate change solutions that this administration champions so much. And I'm glad you brought up disinformation, because that's what our exchange participants provide when they provide their firsthand authentic experiences to each other, to their community members. They're helping us encourage others to develop critical thinking skills, which build understanding and resilience in local communities as we are combating that disinformation. But I think all of this ties together in exactly what you'll be talking about shortly, which is this commitment to equity, to access, to diversity, to inclusion, something that's such a cornerstone of this administration's values, but something that we've been working on, and I know all the partners here and all of us individually and collectively have been working on for such a long time. So now is the chance for us to double down on our efforts, to highlight what we know works, to address the opportunities that we know are there. Here at the Bureau, our functional Bureau strategy has very much championed equity, inclusion, and access, and our outward-facing problems. And we're also going to add a goal here of addressing those issues for our workforce, to make sure that people that represent our programs also represent the greater population of our society as well. So I'm looking forward to it. You're going to be hearing a lot of this from us, because this is what our society is. It's what we all value, and something that we'll never stop working on. It's hard, but if it wasn't hard, why would we not want to do this? So thanks, Hilary.
Thank you. Nicole, to spend just a few minutes with you talking about upcoming regulations. We received some questions in the last session about the au pair clarifying regulation that you all have been working on. First of all, we appreciate the State Department's embrace of the need for that kind of regulation and the importance of it. Can you tell us what you think the timing would be for the release of that clarifying reg for comment? I believe that's the next step. Maybe you can talk about what you think the timing might be for that.
Sorry, already unmuted. I'd be happy to, Alir. Since I onboarded 2 months ago, as I think I mentioned you when we spoke a few weeks ago, the au pair regulation has been one of my main priorities. I personally want to make sure I understand the equities of all the stakeholders before moving forward. To that end, frankly, I'm going to hang out with 500 au pairs at the New York City Marathon this Sunday, hand out water to the runners. I look forward to meeting with your community next week, and we're having internal conversations both at the State Department and in the interagency around next steps to move this forward. We completely appreciate the need for the clarifying rule. We want to give clear direction that can guide the sponsors and the host families and the au pairs for years to come. I can tell you that I hope that will be in the next 6 months, but hope is about all I can offer at this point. I don't control many pieces of the process. Certainly don't control OMB and how fast they're going to work. And there's parts of the interagency conversation I also can't control. So know that I am focused on this. I'm happy, look forward to hearing from you all in the hallways next week. I'll attend Karen Ward's session, a breakout session on the au pair program, and look forward to working on that. And since you only have 60 seconds left, I'll just toss out for a freebie. We are also focused on subpart A and summer work travel, and we're hoping to get to all of this really as soon as possible. But I appreciate things have been sitting around for a little while. It's not for lack of focus on the part of the team. There's been a variety of complications, but I'm very focused on these things and working closely with our team that's focused on this as well.
Well, thank you. As you know, from me and from our sponsors, there's a lot of urgency around this work in the au pair front. And needing to close out the session where we began it back with you and with your alumni hat. So Ethan talked about priorities for the administration. Of course, there are lots of priorities. How are you all thinking about the alumni community that you engage directly and also through the sponsorship. How are you anticipating tapping that alumni network to advance the administration's priorities?
So by nature of exchanges, we are already tapping into and advancing many of the administration policies. So, you had a question about how we're doing this, in terms of this information and other things. And, we've always been doing this in ECA. We are very strategic in our focus. And, we do also learn from our we learned from our success stories. So as far as the alumni is concerned, one area that I'd like to mention are our U.S. alumni. They're an extension of the goodwill, that is brought that is brought about by exchanges, and with the administration focusing more about trying to make foreign policy relevant to all Americans. We are sort of focusing more on our U.S. alumni. How can they contribute to the efforts that the State Department is making, either with the global international exchange community or within their own communities themselves? So we are also focusing on career development for U.S. alumni. We feel that, as an extension of their experiences, that they could actually share some of the lessons learned from, if they're overseas in high school, they could, speaking of campaigning and spreading the word, we're hoping we'll reach all the different demographics and say, if you had a good experience, like Nicole's husband, please, share that information whenever you network with, in your community. So that is one area where we are, shifting our focus a little more and making sure that we engage U.S. alumni in a way that they can continue to give back. And so it's not, I was a Peace Corps 20 years ago and that was it. But how can you continue to use your international skills to benefit the greater community?
Yeah, and that's very important. We talked in the last session, and we're extending, by the way, a few minutes this conversation to 3:20. For those of you who are wondering, so we talked in the last session about the importance of storytelling, right, and the importance of viewing participants as ambassadors for the programs that they're part of and for international exchange after their experience. We began working with your office pretty closely in 2019 around Exchange Days, is using that as an opportunity to connect alumni with current participants, with other organizations, with local officials and schools and host employers and all that. And of course, we just got started and then the pandemic struck. But hopefully 2022 will be a year when people will be gathering back together in person, and we can resurrect that effort. We'd love to be able to do that with your office, and your office does such important work given the importance of sharing people's experiences, and as you said, also being ambassadors to other people as well. So with that, let me thank the four of you again for joining us. Even more importantly, for all the work that you've done in the past, all the work that you're doing now, all the work that you're going to be doing in the future. We really are indebted to you, and we know that you're passionate about these programs. Ethan was talking about this. I know from my experience interacting with all of you at State, not just the four of you, but also with your teams and others, that people care about these programs. As I like to say to our members, when we go up to Capitol Hill, congressional staff and members of Congress want to talk to you, exchange sponsors, hosts, and participants. This is actually the fun part of policy work, right? There's a lot of policy work that is difficult, and I've in past lives have dealt with very difficult policy challenges, but these aren't those. So these are good news programs, and thank you for being a part of them, and thank you for being a part of our conference. And we look forward, hopefully, to seeing you all next week in person. So with that, let me thank you. And for everyone else, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll be back to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alir.
Thank you.